Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Thompson, Director of Events at Business Publications Corp, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our final Fearless focus in our three-part virtual series. And if this is the first time you're joining us, we're glad that you're here. When we launched Fearless at the end of 2020, we envisioned it as more than a weekly e-newsletter and content hub. We wanted to create a space for meaningful conversation and connection. The vision led to the creation of our Fearless Focus virtual event, offering an accessible platform for individuals across the state and beyond to join the conversation. Since its inception, our Fearless following has grown into a supportive community that is passionate about empowering Iowa women to succeed in work and life. As I mentioned, this is our last Fearless focus of the year, but we invite you to join us at our annual Fearless celebration on Wednesday, October 30th at the Des Moines Marriott downtown. We have a dynamic lineup of inspiring women who will share their stories of courage and resilience. You will also have the unique opportunity to sit with some incredible female leaders, including over 40 of our past Women of Influence honorees, as they lead meaningful discussions and topics affecting the women today. Through these roundtable discussions, you'll connect with multiple leaders and peers, building valuable relationships and gaining fresh perspective. You can register for this event at our general admission tickets at businessrecord.com/events. And if you're interested in hosting a group at one of our corporate tables, you can reach out to Lynn Belknap at bpcdm.com. It's clear that the connections between women and their male allies are a powerful force. And when we come together, we create a network of support, inspiration, and collaboration that's unparalleled. It's our goal to create an atmosphere where everyone has a voice and a seat at the table. So come ready to be inspired, share your voice, and engage in this empowering experience on October 30th. Today's discussion will focus on the role mentors play in empowering women. Whether or not you have deemed someone a mentor in your life, I'm confident that each of you can picture someone who's provided some sort of encouragement or wisdom, guidance, or feedback, or simply has provided a listening ear in your personal or professional journey. So to dive more into this topic, please welcome our special events projects editor, Emily Wood, who will introduce our fantastic lineup of panelists and dive into the conversation. Emily?
Thank you, Stacy, and hello, everyone. I'm Emily Wood, the Business Records Special Projects Editor. We're so excited to have you join us for our last Fearless Focus of 2024. We're focusing on leadership and mentorship today, which has been one of the most important topics that we've covered. In our coverage, we've reported on representation of women in leadership and some of the solutions that might help us achieve gender parity. And one of those, of course, is mentorship. We have some extraordinary leaders that we're talking to today, and they've all served as mentors in various capacities. And they're going to talk to us about how we can support women in leadership. We want this to be interactive, so feel free to join in the discussion by putting your own thoughts and questions in the chat, and I'll try to ask as many of the audience questions as I can. We've got a great lineup with us today. With us, we have Bridget Cravens-Neely, CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Iowa, Monica Friedman, Chief Human Resources Officer at LCS, Amelia Marroquin, Multicultural Board Member with Salud, Mollie Ross, Vice President of Operations at Technology Association of Iowa, and Barbara Wilson, President at the University of Iowa. To start off, I've asked each of them to share a little story about how mentorship, whether as a mentor or a mentee, has had a meaningful impact on their careers. So Bridget, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so very much, Emily and Stacy. Appreciate this opportunity. And thank you to all of the viewers out there who are paying attention and watching us. For me, growing up, I came from a single parent household where my mother raised me on her own for the most part. And I was a latchkey kid starting at age 9. And so one of the most meaningful and powerful things that my mother could have ever done for me is to put women in my life who served as mentors. And at the time growing up, I had no idea what mentorship was, what it meant, but I definitely knew what it felt like. And so throughout my time growing up, it was amazing to me how much they poured into me, the love that they gave me, the redirection that they gave me. I was a tomboy. I was a rambunctious youth, but I was also extremely shy and uncomfortable in my own skin. And because they saw the potential in me and the opportunities that I had ahead of me, that if I stayed focused and if I stayed committed to who I was and what I could do, that I would accomplish so very much. And it's them, along with my mother, who I credit to me becoming the woman that I am today and the woman that you see before you. So thank you so very much for this opportunity and for the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you. Monica.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the Business Publications for putting this on, and to the other panelists. I'm excited for this discussion today. I certainly have had the opportunity to learn from a lot of leaders who have mentored me. I've had the opportunity to learn from many who I have mentored, because I truly think it's a two-way street. But when I think about the impact on me personally, I wanted to share a story about a leader who mentored me and really helped to accelerate and sustain the trajectory of my career. I had been focused, on honing my HR skills, developing relationships, and really working hard, taking on new challenges as they came to me. And I had my eye on my dream job. And that job opened up sooner than I thought it would. And I really probably needed a few more years to cook, as they say, in my role to be truly ready. But I wanted it, and I applied for it. The hiring leader for that role had watched me in my career, and I went through a rigorous interview process, and then I just waited to see what would happen. I'll never forget when she called me and she told me that I had been selected for that role. She acknowledged the fact that it was going to be a stretch assignment for me. And she also acknowledged the fact that there were going to be people who said that I wasn't ready and maybe shouldn't have been chosen. But she told me that she was confident that I was the best choice for the role. And she promised me that she would make me a bit uncomfortable, that she would give me the feedback and mentorship that I needed along the way to be successful. And I, in turn, promised her that I would work hard, that I would take that feedback, I would listen to it, and I would not disappoint her. And as I progressed through the years, she did just that. She gave me assignments that pushed me even more than I thought that I was probably capable of, but she did it with a supportive style that gave me feedback even when it was tough to hear. And then, really just watched me grow and develop. And I will never forget that. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for that. And I am forever grateful to her.
Thank you. Amelia, what about you?
Thank you. Thank you first for having me here. Really, it's a pleasure to be with all of these powerful women here. Maybe my story or my idea on this topic is like different than many of you. Being a person of color, being a person of different background, makes things a little bit more difficult, and definitely there are challenges, right? I would say growing up, I never thought myself being seeing myself in a position that I'm at this moment, or things I have done that I never will cross my mind, because I grew up in a very hostile home back in my country, El Salvador. But at the same time, I think whatever experiences I had during those 20 years that I lived back there, I think kind of helped me to be a little bit more strong and kind of face life differently. So when I moved to Iowa, I mean, it's like I was a person with no English at all. I didn't know what to do, where to go, because I mean, we were in Iowa. Iowa, I mean, back then is like, especially Storm Lake, zero Spanish speakers, maybe a couple, but really you couldn't do much with whatever you knew. So it was very challenging at first, and I think what it takes, or it took for me, is just to find the right person that can at least tell you you can do it. Don't be afraid. I'm here with you. I think those were like things that always keep my mind going. Like, okay, if one person can believe in me, I think I can do things a little bit better. That's the way I start, like trying to do things differently, in the way that I came to this area to work in a meat packing plant. So I went and I tried. I last 2 days, and it's like, this is not for me. I think I can do more things. So with that, it came a little bit challenge. Let's like learn English, and then try to finish your high school diploma, or try to go to college. I mean, those were challenges really hard for me, because again, in my mind, always I think Spanish. Even though I've been here for years and years, I'm Spanish speaker. So it was a double challenge for me, because I had to double work at whatever challenges I had to think twice, like think about it that in Spanish, and think about it in English, like to make sure that I was doing the right decision. So again, it has been challenging, but at the same time rewarding, because I found the right people, the right person to tell me that where to go, what to do, and I think that was powerful for me, and it's something that I wanna keep going and try to motivate other generations to keep doing it the same way that I mean that I did, because anything is possible if you set your mind for it.
Thank you. Mollie?
Yeah, good afternoon. I do also want to say thank you to Emily and to the entire Business Records staff for hosting this conversation and the entire Fearless series. I'm incredibly honored to get to take part on the panel with all of these women today. When I think about mentorship and the impact it's had on me, I've been incredibly fortunate to have a number of people who've served as mentors throughout my career. And one of the greatest impacts I've experienced is a leader who's taken the time to invest and witness in my work and really identify strengths in me that I certainly didn't recognize, and I probably never would have recognized, if I'm being honest, and not only highlight those to me, bring them forward, but also then push me in directions that were certainly far outside of my comfort zone, but to really hone those strengths. Today is a perfect example of that. For a long time in my career, I was more than happy to be in the background, behind the scenes doing the work, and my leader who recognized the potential to help tell the story here at TAI, and to be out front representing our community. It's been immeasurable. The impact has been immeasurable to me and to my career. So that having that outside perspective, or that third party perspective, really help identify strengths and at times weaknesses too, has been a huge impact for me.
Thanks. And Barb?
It's always hard going last because there's some repetition. So thank you, Emily, Stacy, all the staff, and to the co-panelists. It's lovely to hear your stories. When I was thinking about mentors, and I've had a lot of them, as many of the panelists have said, probably one of the first examples of a pivotal moment in my career was when I was in graduate school. And, this goes back many years. I was probably about 22 years old. And I was teaching for a faculty member in a large class. And she came to me and she said, "Can we meet after class?" And so I went to her office, and she said, I'm going to get notice that I've just received a big grant from NIH, and I will have the opportunity to hire 2 research assistants. And I'd like you to consider being one of them. And I looked at her probably with the biggest shock on my face, because I couldn't imagine what that meant to even be a research assistant. Here I was a TA in her class, and I kind of thought mostly I was doing an okay job as a TA. And I just said, "Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think I'll, just keep being your TA, but thank you for considering me." And she said, well, why wouldn't you be interested? This is an opportunity that's just amazing. And, you know, I'm sure I expressed some self-doubt. And she said, you can do this. I know you can do this. Now, if you want to keep teaching, it's up to you. But I've watched you work this semester, and I know you could take us to the next level on this project. So I went home and thought about it, went back the next day and decided, with her confidence in me, which I didn't have in myself, that I would take the leap and become an RA. And, you know, that moment I turned into a researcher, and I wouldn't have finished my PhD or gone on to become a faculty member or done the work that I've done researching children and media for all the years I did that before I got into administration. But I think the lesson for me was, a lot of times women don't believe in themselves. They think of all the reasons why they shouldn't do a job or they can't do a job. And some of what you've heard from the other panelists is similar to that. And it takes a great mentor to help you recognize that you can take a stretch and you can jump into something that you're not sure you're capable of, with the support of someone who sees what your potential is, even if you can't recognize that. So she was a mentor for me for many, many, many years after that. And I credit her with helping me take a big risk.
Thank you all. Those are great stories to kick off our conversation. I want to talk about mentoring in the workplace, but first I want to go back a stage before folks are in the workplace. And Bridget, I want to start with you and hearing how in the mentorship that folks get through Big Brothers Big Sisters, and as youths, how that might influence where they end up career-wise, and especially for young girls.
Absolutely. So to keep on time, I have my timer going, just so you know. Mentoring young girls, I say this all the time, and whether it's boys or girls, but mentoring youth is a little bit different than mentoring adults. From a career perspective, because there's certain objectives that obviously are apparent and are placed upon the mentor as well as the mentee. It's more of a professional relationship that potentially develops into a personal relationship if the connection is right. And so with youth, though, you're starting out having to make that connection immediately. And it's important because young people, what I've learned, not only mentoring young people, but also in the last couple of years where I've been leading this organization, just paying attention, watching, observing how our match support specialists and how our bigs interact with our littles. The critical thing that we tell our bigs, especially new bigs coming into our program, is that connection, and making that connection is so critically important to be able to solidify that before you even think about trying to guide them, teach them, nurture them, be able to lead them, redirect them, whatever the mentoring relationship requires, or actually whatever that youth requires. You got to make that connection first, because if that connection isn't there, they're not going to listen because they don't have to. This is something that they are volunteering to do as well. They're volunteering to let you in, just like you're volunteering to come and be a part of their lives. And that's one of the critical things that I think should carry forward throughout any mentorship, any type of relationship where someone else who may have more experience in certain areas is being able to, is given the opportunity and the privilege to pour into another human being. And so for me, it's that connection point, and making sure that that happens, and that is the priority in order to solidify that relationship.
Thank you. Amelia, I wonder if you have anything to add about the importance of mentoring youths, because I know you're involved with the schools in Storm Lake.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's it's a little bit tough to mentor, youth, but I think, at times you handle situations that you are not prepared for it, right? But I think as soon as the connection exists, for me, in general, a perfect mentor is like someone that can help you, can help you grow and connect with that. Definitely that would be something that is very helpful, especially with youth community. I mean, they're going through so much these days, and having that specific connection is fundamental. Yeah, I work a lot with different ages, but I really love to kind of mentor, kind of be on top of working with mothers and parents who are struggling with their kids. Because, at times we come from different perspectives. And at times we need someone to kind of let you know, okay, maybe this is not the right way, but it's going to help you to maybe, with whatever situation you're going through right now. We know, and it's not something that we all know this, that, I mean, the young generations are going through a lot of different stress situations. And at times, it's not that their parents do not understand them, it's the parents do not know how to handle those situations. And I think we forget that parents need that mentoring also to be able to help their kids.
Thank you. And Barb, when girls turn into young women that go off to college, a lot of times folks find their first real true mentors, as they might consider them, when they're in college. And I'm wondering, from your perspective in higher education, what does that mentoring look like, and how can it influence where folks end up in their careers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's really important to have women leaders to inspire women. And I'm really proud at the University of Iowa that I'm the third female president, not the first and not the second, but the third. And that's not true of all of our peer institutions. Indiana just hired their first, Penn State just hired their first, but I'm the third. So, and in addition to that, 9 of our 12 deans are women. So we've got an unparalleled number of female leaders and people to inspire our students, which is good because 55% of our students are women, which people don't often realize. So I think part of it is having people in these roles that students can look up to and can see themselves in different phases. Of course, not everyone wants to be the president of the university, and I wouldn't encourage them to seek that as their ultimate goal, but thinking about how to be a leader, how to take on challenges, it helps to see women doing that. And so I think, visibility of women leaders is a big part of what we're trying to do at Iowa.
Monica, from a workplace perspective, what do you think a good mentorship relationship should look like?
Well, I think from a workplace perspective, it has to be one that is based on a foundation of connection, a relationship that is built. Now, sometimes that happens naturally, where somebody seeks another person out because they have a characteristic that appeals to them. Sometimes it's a skill set they want to learn more about. And so sometimes those pairings happen that way. Other times it's through formal mentorship programs with more of a specific framework and application process, et cetera. Regardless, though, to get the most value out of those relationships, it really has to be, a two-way street between the mentee and the mentor, with that mentee really coming forward with questions, topics that they want to learn more about, that is foundational to the development that they're facing into at that point in their career. And at different stages of our careers, we all need different things. And so I think it's incumbent upon each of us to be aware of those things and to have the accountability to seek someone out, whether formally or informally, to help us develop those things. And then on the flip side, I think, and Barb just spoke to this, seeing other leaders and having those leaders, each of us, have the accountability to have a commitment to mentoring up and coming professionals to help, really set them up for success, just as others have done for us.
Mollie, I want to ask you, because I know the technology world can definitely be male dominated, and you worked in an athletics position previously too. That's also a male-dominated world. And I wonder if you could speak to the role of male allies in helping empower women.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important question. You're right. I have worked in pretty male-dominated industries, and frankly, the individuals who I would consider mentors in my life have been male. And I think that's incredibly important. You know, it's just a fact. We're still in a situation where, you know, majority of leadership positions are held by men. And I think, at least in this community, in my experience, we're incredibly fortunate to have a number of men who, you know, want to encourage more female leaders, want to improve the gender parity, and are willing and ready to reach out and to serve in those roles as mentors, or also to help connect, you know, other women where for individuals looking for female mentorship. So I think it can be just as impactful. Certainly, I think, you know, there are going to be things that men may not relate to other women on, but just in the same way that, you know, I may not relate to any of the other women on this panel in specific ways. I think Barb and Monica's points, connection is key. And I think it comes down to finding connections, whether that individual has, you know, the same gender, the same race, the same background, whatever that is. I tend to believe we can find connection with most people, and maybe that individual can serve as a mentor for one specific skill set that you're looking for. Or, you know, if you want to change departments or, you know, areas of specialization, maybe they can help you grow in that area. I think it's about finding that connection and finding kind of the purpose for that relationship. You know, as I mentioned, I've had a number of different mentors, and they've all helped me in different ways. So I think it's absolutely possible. It's valuable. And again, I think we're incredibly fortunate, at least in our community and our state, from my experience, that we have a number of really strong male allies that are ready, willing, and encouraging to help women grow into leadership roles. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's a really important point to make.
Great. This question's for whoever wants to take it first. So we've talked a lot about mentorship already. I'm wondering what other solutions you all think are out there to help reach gender parity in leadership roles.
I can offer a perspective on that. I believe it's really important to be purposeful about that. And it starts really before people even join your organization. I think you have to have a focus on having diverse candidate slates so that your selection process allows you to have people coming into your organization that can grow and develop, that come from a variety of backgrounds, that, you know, represent both genders, and you know, even thinking about development then. So making sure that your development programs that you have, because that's a key, it's really giving people what they need at the stage of their career, but it's offering those opportunities to all. So paying attention to the makeup of those programs, and again, being purposeful about that is really, really important. If there are mentorship programs, making sure that you're purposeful about that. But then it's also listening to feedback from folks. Maybe it's in exit interviews. Maybe they've made the choice to leave the organization. Listening to why, through engagement surveys, et cetera. Listening for anything that could stand in the way, perceptions that people have. And then as leaders in the organization, doing what's in your power to remove those barriers, whether they're, you know, perceived barriers, or maybe there are some real things that are standing in the way. But if we're purposeful about that, I think the progress can be, you know, much quicker than it would be without that purposeful focus.
And I'd like to piggyback on what Monica just said. So Monica, thank you for talking about being purposeful and intentional. I think that in line with that, and you mentioned listening, in order to listen, you have to make sure that there are voices that are being heard, or there's a platform and a way for voices to be heard. And I think that being able to provide, as leaders, providing that platform, providing that opportunity to truly hear the voices of women in the workforce, and quite honestly, everyone. Similar to, not generalizing or categorizing everybody in just based on our gender. Women, we're individuals, we're human beings. We think differently, we operate differently, we walk differently, we talk differently. And so I think it's important to make sure that those unique voices are heard, and that, yes, we absolutely listen to what is being said. So making sure that we're paying attention and asking those curious questions, so that that other person or whoever is sharing knows that we're hearing them, and then being able to pull them off to the side to dive in deeper. And I think by bringing those voices forward, you also create a sense of value that that person may not have felt, that woman may not have felt in the workplace, especially, and us working in a small office. I have a staff of 17 people, and we're growing. And so as all of these different unique talents, skills, mindsets, voices come forward or come into one common place, it's important and critical for me as their leader to be able to give them that space and that opportunity to share. So we do that in staff meetings. We do that in individual one-on-one meetings, or what I like to call connect meetings. And we provide, and then I provide feedback, or I ask for insight. Okay, great idea. Tell me how to do that. Let them lead and take some ownership in what it is that they're bringing forward, or the message that they're delivering. So
I totally agree with what they're saying. And we need to think about be effective leaders. I mean, we have to have that clear vision and just like the strong strategy for implementing the change. Otherwise, it's not gonna happen. At times, we have to think about redesign the role, enable like things that we have to change, flexible work, whatever. Those kind of stuff is crucial because we continue. We need to stop the stigma. At times we have to work on that really hard to accommodate what the needs are, covered. So I think, and again, I mean, accommodating according to the personal needs is not only for women, it can be also for men. But again, we need to redesign the roles and try to work harder on that.
I'll add it just really quickly to what I think everyone's said here, both between being intentional and accommodating for roles. I think part of that is really clear expectations for any role, and communicating those expectations clearly and being open and transparent. Both, it's as we look to bring more women to leadership roles, that means maybe a style can change in a role or an approach. If we're clear about the expectations of the outcomes and the goals, then the approach should matter less, or at least we should be open to a different approach or style. And along with that, I think we here in certain organizations, to Amelia's point about accommodations, whether that's flexible work or hybrid work, and people talking about, whether or not you can truly be a leader or achieve leadership roles if you're working remote or working hybrid. And it's a really tricky balance for organizations to figure out how to make that work. And I think that really comes down to transparency. And if you want your leaders in the office, then I think you have to communicate that, or I think it's easier for everyone to communicate that. I think we run into trouble when organizations want to be flexible and want to promote hybrid work, but then are less willing to put people in leadership positions who want to work remotely. Right, wrong, or other, I think an organization has to decide how they want people to work and what works best for their teams, but then being truly transparent about that and not running into a situation where, we're saying we're open to remote work, but, behind closed doors, you're never going to get that promotion or whatever it is, if that's the way you're working.
Yeah, definitely a good point. Barb, I want to ask you specifically on this question of barriers for women in leadership. When we did an interview a couple of years ago, you said something that stuck with me. You had said something about how if if we're, it's great that we need to talk about and address the barriers to women in leadership, but we also need to promote the idea of it being exciting to be a woman in leadership and not making it sound like it's a bad thing. So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you remember anything I said, Emily. So thank you for that. I think that is part of, I was glad that Mollie just brought up the style issue, because I think one of the challenges particularly in Western, shall we say, Western world, we believe leaders should be of a certain ilk. They should look this way. They should talk this way. There's even research to suggest that in group meetings, the person that talks the most is assigned being the most leaderly among the participants. And so I think we have a style problem, and we tend to think that people who are most assertive, talk the most, and command control are the leaders in the room. And, we all know that that's really not the case. So some of it is breaking the mold and allowing alternative forms of leadership, which I think you were suggesting, Mollie, to be prominent. And for different roles, talking the most is not actually going to be the best leader. And I always say, if I'm in a meeting and I'm talking more than everybody else in the meeting, I get an F for that meeting, because I didn't learn very much. If I'm yapping on and on about what I think or what, I learn when I listen. And so that's an alternative model of leadership, to listen carefully, not to listen to counter argue, but to listen to learn. We don't think about listening skills very often as being part of leadership, but I think about that a lot. So I think part of it is just opening the model up so that women and people who are not traditionally dynamic and outspoken and in control can see themselves in these roles and think about leadership as being opportunities for them. And we have to acknowledge there are great things about lifting organizations up, helping to change people's pathways. If you're inspired by your work and you can make an organization better, there's nothing better than that, frankly. So I think you're right, talking about the rewards of leadership, not just all the trauma associated with it or all the challenges associated with it, is an important thing to do, especially when you're, talking to people who might be aspiring to these kinds of roles.
As we're talking about this, I want to read one comment from our annual survey on gender issues that we do in the spring each year. One person said this year, "I'm a member of a senior leadership team at my work and the only one that has to balance caregiving of school-age children. My company is very supportive, but I see that male counterparts, although active parents, do not seem to have the same family expectations upon them." And I'm wondering if you all might weigh in on, with women a lot of times being primary caregivers, whether that's for kids or otherwise, women are, more likely than men to have different gaps in their career experiences that might affect their ascension to leadership. And just wondering what you all think the workforce might do about this to still help elevate women. And Monica, do you want to take a go at that first?
Sure. I think one of the lessons that I learned early on, I told that story about moving into a role maybe before I was ready. I was a little bit younger, and I sat on, this was a crucible moment for me. I sat on this leadership panel and I was really prepped. I had all this data and information I wanted to share about things we were accomplishing. And I got this question that I did not expect. And the person said, "I know you have 4 kids and you have a spouse that works and you're in this higher level position. How do you balance it?" And, it kind of took me back for a second, because I had, at that point, our culture in that organization didn't talk about that a lot. There were a lot of, if there was a woman in a higher level leadership role, she maybe didn't have kids, or if she did, maybe her spouse stayed home. And so by talking about it, I had these calls and emails that came afterwards and said, "Thank you for sharing that." And the more we talked about it, to the point of other people said, maybe we should talk more about that. And it started to happen. And then people could visualize that, hey, you know what? Sometimes you did just fight the war before you got to work because somebody didn't want to wear what was set out, or they didn't want to eat what you gave them for lunch. And, all of the things that happen that we were putting behind this mask, like leave it at the door. And if we leave it at the door, the people that struggle with it don't get to see that that's okay. And so I think it's really, really important for us to share that, and then not to make assumptions. I also made a mistake of assuming that because my leader didn't have kids, that she wouldn't understand when something I was going through. And I couldn't have been more wrong about that. So I think we have to share, and then I think we have to support one another.
Anyone want to add to that?
So being vulnerable is critical as a leader. And I think we've learned that over time. So as we talk about styles, or we talk about fitting into a certain image of what leadership has been portrayed as for years and years and years, bringing vulnerability forward and allowing the people that you're leading, the people that you're working with, to see your human side, is what I like to say. It's critical because then it gives them allowance to be human as well. And it allows them to then have a further deeper appreciation and respect and understanding, because the mutuality that has to happen is the common understanding. Monica mentioned in her initial story that mentoring has to be a two-way street. There has to be giving and receiving from both. But in order for that to happen, the transparency and the vulnerability has to exist as well. And so I think that as long as we can act, we're all good humans. Let's be good humans. Let's interact as good humans. And then that all comes to fruition. It all comes out as allowing, again, going back to that connection point. It allows that real connection to happen, and really allows leaders to show up as leaders, so that the people around them are willing to support them just as they are there to support the people around them. Hope I made that clear.
Mollie, since you talked about flexibility, could you talk about that in the sense of leaders who are caregivers or have other roles going on outside of work?
Yeah, I think, I want to say both what Monica and Bridget were both talking about has been impactful for me, seeing leaders in our space that have children, have other responsibilities, and are willing and open to talk about it. I have small children now, and it is a balancing act, and it's difficult. So, from my own personal experience, having people who are willing to be open and to share their experiences has made it far easier for me, or at least has made it feel like it's okay to struggle with this sometimes. But yeah, I think, the question you asked prior to the panel about one way to help, I talked about flexibility with work. And I think, it's not just about having flexibility in your time. I'm incredibly fortunate. We have a small team, and a number of us have small children. So, we're all pretty flexible with picking up for school and getting soccer practice and sick kids and all of that. That's meant the world to me, but it's not just a physical time have to be in one place or another, but the mental load that carries. And, I think this aligns with some of that, home labor, caregiving that women sometimes carry. The mental load of all of that is a lot sometimes. And I think if you can be in a place where you know that your team and your leader supports you and understands, the juggle that you have, that it lightens the load just a little bit, or at least it has for me, you know, and to be able to be open about the struggles, or where you got to be or what came up. Just being able to communicate that and get it out and know that, you know, you're in a safe space, I think is incredibly impactful, and where leaders can, you know, not only share their experiences, but let people know that it's okay and really make it okay, I think goes a long ways.
Totally agree with Molly, but at the same time, I think about like women's like we are here in this panel right now. We have an officer where we have this, you know, in a way, set schedule. But let's think about those leaders, women that work in a different settings, like meat packing plants, or oh gosh, it's hard, and I don't imagine how much they go through. And yeah, I'm talking about the mental load in you know, with all the primary decision makers for women at times, right? That's really hard. And I think something that will be very helpful, that, you know, of course it needs to be implemented, is like have some type of support, you know, life transition or something, like companies can invest like in family support measures, or uh, have some type of parental networks or child care referral services, just, you know, to first retain their you know, retain people, and lower the resignation rates that happen at times, because they have to make decisions, or I stay home or I continue with my job, right? So I think it's important to just make sure that hopefully one, you know, every company should be thinking about having that support system for their leaders, women leaders out there, to, you know, make sure that they have what they need to be able to perform a better job.
To transition topics here, Barb, if you had to give a piece of advice for young women who are seeking out mentors, what would you tell them and what they should look for in a mentor?
I think I would suggest more than one mentor. I think somebody mentioned this before, but you know, it's not really realistic to think one person is going to give you all the advice you need. And it may be that there are different people that you would seek for different kinds of advice. So that's probably the most important. And then the second piece of advice is find a mentor who will listen to you. There's a lot of people that want to give you advice, but half the time when I'm mentoring someone, I want to have them talk and hear themselves. So I think listening is really important in the mentoring role, because sometimes people discover things just by talking, and they don't have that opportunity to do that very often in formal contexts. So have more than one mentor and find mentors who listen to you.
Anyone else want to weigh in on advice?
I would say that empowering, you know, next generations, that's a key. You know, it's important to advocate for, especially for women, to advocate for their own future, you know, set themselves like, you know, okay, you have a good potential for success. And yeah, they have to find the right mentor, as you know, I mentioned. I mean, you don't have to keep with one mentor. You can find another one that can be the right one for you. Somebody that can help you to set you up for growth. You know, because again, identify the potential, like in an early age. You know, that helps, because opportunities can develop the skills, experience. You know, that becomes once, you know, like you are on the field and finding the right mentor for you. So it's very essential to try to work on, you know, trying to establish something, mentorship programs or something around the communities, to be able to advocate for women, and, you know, promote the, you know, how beneficial they can be, and find opportunities for them that, you know, are available out there, because I think at times we lack of that.
Yeah, I just want to add on to, you know, all of us are in the people business, every last one of us. And being in the people business, you have to take into account emotions. So I keep going back to being a good human, treating each other with humanity, treating each other with grace. There's also being empathetic. Being a good listener requires being empathetic. Being vulnerable requires having compassion. Those are real emotions and feelings that a lot of times we don't get to talk about in the workplace because you're there to do a job, right? But the moment we start paying attention and taking into account the human element and how important and crucial and critical that is, that's when we become excellent mentors, because our lived experiences can be a testimony and can also be that source of information for someone else to be able to learn from. We go through life's experiences for the simple fact of learning. They're all learning opportunities. But when we hold them to ourselves and keep them to ourselves, if we're not willing to share, if we're not willing to give of ourselves, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, as well as the person or persons that we're mentoring. So I go back to connection, transparency, empathy, compassion, but then also the passion for that person, and having their care as a priority for making that not the relationship happen, but for helping them to grow. They came to you for a reason. You were selected for a reason. Don't take it for granted.
If I could real quick, I'll add on. Emily, you asked about, advice for younger women. And I just wanted to add, I think when early in my career, that felt like a really daunting thing. I heard all of the advice about find yourself a mentor. And that felt like, you're making a big ask of someone, of a long-term relationship, and whatever that could be, it felt like a big hill to climb for me. And some of the advice that I give individuals now that I interact with early in their careers is it doesn't have to be a big thing. Barb mentioned you have a lot of different mentors. It doesn't have to be a long-term, years-long thing. And I think it can start as simply as if there's someone in your network, whether at your company or, seeing people at the business record events, whatever that is, and just ask somebody for coffee. I would go in with a plan or a specific ask of, I saw you do this. I heard you were really good at this, or I'm trying to grow in this way. Let's start with a cup of coffee. And maybe that's all it ever is, but you'll probably walk away with something. And maybe it'll turn into more, or, you'll start meeting semi-regularly, or maybe they'll introduce you into somebody that they know. And I think more often than not, they, at least in my experience, tend to grow from those more organic interactions in that way. And if it's one meeting or years long, either way, I think it's a benefit.
Yeah, that's great advice, Molly. I think you can't underscore that enough. You don't have to go in and say, I want you to be my mentor, because someone might go, I don't know if I can do that. But, a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or a brief discussion, and you may decide this person isn't a good mentor for me. So you'll learn as much as you might learn from the person. But I think it should be really casual at the front end.
I'm glad that you bring that up, because we here in Storm Lake, we created a little group called Latinas Racing Together, and that is the idea to, bring up topics or just invite them to have some type of, have a coffee, as you mentioned, and the idea is for them to kind of meet each other and find maybe they can connect with someone as a mentor, because we know, women have the potential to change the way power is used, and the world is for everybody. So why not giving them the opportunity?
And then find something in common with them. Because if there's a common connection between the two of you, that makes the conversation so much easier. I've had so many young professionals or professionals that are, just getting started in their careers ask me or talk about how anxious they get when they hear the word networking. And so I've tried to take that out of my vocabulary, except if I'm talking about technology. Molly, plug for you. But taking the word networking out, if networking doesn't work for you, talk about making a connection. You just want to make a connection with somebody. That's all you're really trying to do. So yeah, Find something common. Find something in common that you can sit and just chat about.
We are already getting very close to our hour, so I want to make sure to give the panelists a heads up to just think of a quick final takeaway to share. But I do want to see, Monica, if you might be able to quickly answer one of the questions that we got in the chat here. They said, what's the best advice for a young professional woman that is struggling to be seen as a leader, regardless of credentials, past mentorship participation, or experiences within the organization?
You know, one of the things that I talk a lot about is you can get experience in a lot of different ways. And one of the key ways that I developed skills that maybe I didn't have the opportunity to develop in my day-to-day work life is through community involvement. You can take on challenges and projects through volunteer work and build those skills. And then you can tell those stories when you are seeking out those job opportunities, you know, with your company. You can show how you have built those skills. So take it upon yourself to do that. Now, that might sound hard, but to the point that we were just talking about in terms of making connections, that's how it happened for me. I had so many people in the community that I would just get to know who then said, hey, maybe you could, you know, volunteer with this organization or sit on that board. And one thing leads to another. And we can do that for other people as well. We have to pay that forward.
Great. So I want to go around and give you each a chance for a final thought, and I'll just go with who I see on my screen here. So Barb, you want to kick us off?
Wow, hard to have a final thought. I think if you're a leader, find someone to help. So we've talked about that. Reach out to people. And if you're aspiring to a different position, ask someone out for coffee.
Bridget?
Don't be afraid to share your own purpose and passion. Share your story, because your story can help someone else to be able to grow and get past whatever that mental barrier may be, to asking for help.
Amelia?
Just don't be afraid. Being a woman in leadership means leading with an open, authentic heart and creating communities that bring the best of people.
Mollie?
Yeah, thank you. One final thought is tough, but I think somewhat along the lines of what I was saying earlier, the advice that I give to so many young career professionals is just to show up. You know, whether it's events in the community, I know the Business Record puts on a number of really great events throughout the year. There are a number of organizations that do volunteer with an organization that you care about. But I think, you know, we can all get inside of our heads and inside of our own little bubbles, and it can feel really daunting at times, but getting out and connecting with people in the community. We have an incredibly caring and giving community. I know a number of people that, you know, are there to help and support. So show up, and you never know who you might meet, who they might introduce you to, and where that might lead.
And Monica?
I guess I'd go back to what I just talked about a bit, and that's pay it forward. You know, we've all benefited in some way from a great mentor or sponsor. Seek out those opportunities to help someone else. And certainly we've all talked about the benefit that brings to us, but pay it forward. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable and share, because when people identify with others who have struggled and then overcome, you know, they can see that opportunity is there for them as well.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers for being here and sharing your thoughts. And also thank you to our audience for tuning in and asking questions and listening. As Stacy mentioned, we hope that you can join us for our Fearless celebration, and you can find those details on our website. If you've got story ideas or feedback on today's event, please reach out to us. If you're interested in supporting work like Fearless and other work produced by our locally owned media company, becoming a Business Record member or sponsor helps us continue to do work like this. Reach out to Lynn Belknap if you're interested in advertising and sponsorship opportunities. And finally, we want to leave you with a call to action. We encourage you to do something in the next week that helps elevate a woman in leadership, whether that's an up-and-coming leader or someone already in leadership. Thank you all so much for attending, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.